Hi, I'm John Bailey of JB Woodcrafts. This is part 2 in a 5-part series on how to turn a wooden bowl on a pole lathe. In the following video I'll be axing out a bowl blank. Don't forget to hit the like and share button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Right, so just before I start axing out this bowl blank, a little bit about the axe that I'm using. So this is an old axe for making shingles for roofs. It's a side axe. As you can see, the blade is offset and it's got a single bevel. I like this for working on bowl blanks because it leaves a nice finish on the back of the bowl, and I find it gives me a very good controlled cut. The handle is offset, so when you're chopping down onto a piece of wood, it helps keep the knuckles out of the way so you don't bark the knuckles. Now, when you're using any kind of chopping block and axe, it's important that you think where the axe starts and where it finishes. Yes, what we don't want to do is miss the block and have the axe come around and hit any part of our body. So the way in which you reduce that risk is being right-handed. I have my left foot forward and my right leg is back in this position, so that if I do miss, there's a good chance that the axe is just going to fly past me. Which is also another reason why we need to make sure that we're aware of what's happening around us whenever we're using something like axes. Okay, but what we need to do first is get some of this bark off. So again, when we're thinking about axe safety, obviously the bark starts at the top here. What we don't want to do is start bringing the axe down onto the top of the work, because it's just too close to where the hand is. So the way in which we overcome that is we move the bowl blank to one side, which is actually moving where the path of the axe is going to be travelling. It's increasing the distance between the path and your left hand. So I can hold the bowl blank fairly securely here, and it's just a case of taking this bark off. And then when we want to work on this part, we just simply flip the bowl blank over. As you can see here, at no point have we ever needed to axe from the top of the work. Okay, so that's got the majority of the bark removed from the blank. We don't need to take all of that off for this next step. Obviously, because the profile of the wood is like that, which would normally follow the back or the outside of the bowl, but because I've decided to cut into the side where the bark has been attached when it was growing, I need to flatten this off so that we can actually get a circle. And it does mean that we're going to have a smaller diameter bowl, but the objective, as I've already mentioned, is to try and save as much of this heartwood as possible. So a lot of this stuff that's on the side here is going to be removed as we continue making the bowl blank. So what I'm going to be doing now is just levelling off this face so that I can scribe the outside of the rim. For this, it's easier to cut across the grain. The reason why I'm levelling off this surface is because we want to have the rim of the bowl on this face, as opposed to starting the rim of the bowl on this side. Now, generally speaking, you get a larger bowl when you work with the wood this way, but what I'm doing is preserving this heartwood so that we have as much of this heartwood left on the bowl, which is, in my opinion, is more attractive than the sapwood that you've got on the outside. So before I can inscribe the rim of the bowl here, I need to have something which is relatively flat for that to work. Okay, so this isn't bad now for the surface to scribe the bowl onto. It's not going to be anywhere near this wide because the piece of wood here is wider than it is in this angle here, particularly when you look at the way in which the bowl angles around here, or the wood angles around that way. So a lot of this sapwood that's on here I'm going to be axing away in a moment, so I'll be scribing a circle onto this face here. This is my scribe, it's what I use for marking up the bowl blank. Right, I'm just going to scribe on the back on this piece of walnut. So what we're looking to achieve here is probably the edges of the bowls are going to be at its widest point here. So if I bring the scribe in, to cut down on the amount of work I need to do with the saw. And because this wood has been sealed, so we don't have any sort of checks or cracks happening on the end of this wood, I can actually bring the scribe closer to this end here, which means I don't need to cut this end off as well as cutting that end off. And it looks like either end would be good for that. So it's important to ensure that you mark where the centre is, because we're going to need to keep coming back to that point. And this is just a visual guide which I will keep coming back to as I'm axing the blank out. And to make that stand out a little bit more, I'm ensure that I keep the centre, which I need to keep coming back to, is recorded properly. And I'm just going to mark this scratch line in with pencil so it's just a little bit more obvious to me as I'm working, though strictly speaking you don't need to do this. So that's given me a bowl with between, it's about 6.5 inches, so I'd imagine the finished bowl is probably going to be about 6.25 inches in diameter, which is about the right size for sort of medium-sized porridge bowl. What we have on this the blank at the moment, we've got the bowl marked out, and then we have this amount of waste wood on the end. We're not going to axe that away, it would just take far too long and is pointless exercise. So I'll get this out of the way, and we move over to the Silky Big Boy, which is a pull saw, which is very, very sharp. But it's ideal for this type of work of cutting. So, the way that I'm working with this particular piece of wood, as you can see, this follows the outside of the tree basically, and what I want to do is square this off. So I've got the edge of the bowl is coming around here, so if I take from the widest point, if I take a line out and almost scratch an imaginary line down there, and I do the same on the corresponding end here, you can see straight off that these pieces of wood, these ears on the side of the wood here, they're not needed, they're waste wood. So I'm going to take those out straight away, which is going to make making the blank easier for the next step. So to do that, I'm going to turn the wood so it's like this. I'm going to bring the throw back out and just take these corners off. Right, so taking this waste wood off, we're going to put the throw, just taking it slightly outside so I'm not taking off too much. You can always take more wood off, you can never put wood back on. Okay, so that's taken a reasonable amount off outside. And we do the same over here. So that now has made this far squarer, which means with a little bit of tweaking we'll be ready to mark up the back side of the bowl and start axing this down in preparation for going up on the lathe. I'm going to come back to my side axe, and I can see here we've still got some waste wood on the side there. So in the vein of keeping the axe below this surface and away from my hand, I can turn the bowl blank slightly this way, which allows me to axe in with my side axe. So you can see I've taken that right up to the edge of the bowl there, and that's giving us a reasonable edge for when I'm working on this side to axe the bowl shape into the blank. So just do the same on the opposite side. Okay, so that has given us something which is pretty much a square, which is what we need to be able to work this down into a bowl blank. Before we can start working on the bowl blank, axing this down to shape, we need to find the centre on the back of the bowl. So to do that we use a high precision tool, fingers. You put your finger on that side and you line it up on the back of the bowl, and then you turn that through 90 degrees, and if your fingers still match up, you have a good approximation of where the centre is. And the good thing about green woodworking is you can work with approximations. So now I've got the centre marked on the back, I'm going to use my scribe to inscribe a smaller circle, which is where the base of the bowl is going to be, and this gives me another visual guide when I'm axing out on the back here on where I'm going to be axing. So now that I've got a circle scribed on there, I'm actually going to turn this into a square, and it will become apparent why when I'm doing the axing work. Right, so that's marked up and ready for the axe work. So now we're going to start axing the bowl blank out. So I have this square marked out on the back, and the reason why I've done that is because I'm going to be cutting across this angle and taking this down to this point here, and I'm going to do that on each of these four corners to start with. So you can see why I like this side axe, because it's given me a nice finish, nice sharp facets on the work there. And what I've done is I've obviously taken out some of the waste wood, but what I haven't done is gone anywhere into where the rim of the bowl has already been marked up, and it's creating this high point, and that's what we want to do, is have these high points on each end before we go to the next step. Okay, so now that you can start seeing the shape of the bowl beginning to appear, but we have these high points, so we need to look at taking those off. Now the grain is running in this direction, so when I've been cutting on these corners I've been going across the grain. I'm now going to go across the grain here and do exactly the same thing, but I'm now working this facet back so that it runs parallel to this square that I've done, whereas these lines have just stopped shy of where where these lines intersect. We flip it round and we do exactly the same on the other end. You may also notice that whilst I'm cutting, where I'm holding the axe has been changing. So when I want a little bit more leverage, a little bit more force behind the blow, I'm holding the axe here, which gives me a lot more power when I'm cutting. When I want to have a little bit more finesse and control over the way in which I'm using the axe, I end up holding or choking up to the axe head. It means there's less force, but there's more control, where I can actually control where the axe is striking more easily. So yeah, this angle's a bit steeper, so I need to look at correcting that, but that will happen as we work round. So we now have these high spots. Now, when you're bowl turning, or you're doing any green woodworking, you need to be conscious of the grain direction, because what is happening here, the grain is running front to back or back to front at the moment. So if I was to bring the axe down in an aggressive cut here, there's a good chance that I just split that piece of wood off. So when I'm working on these, on the sides of the bowl, I change the angle of attack and I take off far smaller shavings, far smaller pieces like that. Alternatively, you can turn it this way and go down with it, work with the grain. And then we come around and do the same on the other side. Need to do a little bit of remedial work on this to get this levelled off before I go any further. And if you note, on this piece of wood here we've got the pith running through the base of the bowl. If I leave that in there, this bowl will crack where that pith dries. So now's a good opportunity. I'm going to dig in that centre a little bit further, but now's a good opportunity to remove that and just level off the base of the bowl. This angle is different from this, so that we'll work on that as we continue working on the bowl blank. What I just need to do is refine the centre on that, mark this up again, and we'll take these other bits off and start looking at removing these four corners so that we've got a round bowl shaped bowl blank. Okay, so I'm just going to remark this so that I've got the centre on the back, so fingertip to fingertip both ways, so that gives me the centre roughly of about there. So I put the scribe in, and just doesn't need to be marked in particularly clearly on this. So we now have a circle here, and I've taken this round to pretty close to a square. So the next part of axing this out is to take these corners off here. So it's going to give me, it's going to be an octagon shape on the back. So coming around to this corner, make sure the thumb and everything is out of the way. Now, as we get closer to this part of the bowl from this side, we can change the angle, which makes the cut steeper. What that does, that is beginning to remove the corner of the wood, bringing this part closer into the rim of the bowl. So we just work round all four corners. So as you can see, this is slowly taking on a more circular shape, and you can start seeing that this itself is becoming more bowl shaped as well. But what we do have, as we're looking around here, where these facets meet, that's creating a high point. When we put this up onto the lathe, these high points are going to catch the tool as we're actually turning that, so it's probably worthwhile just spending a little bit more time axing this down so that we remove as many of these high points as possible, and that the angle on this side looks similar to that side, and we can turn the bowl around like this to see where we need to continue working on that. So I'm just going to take these high points off. Now this part doesn't need to be perfect, but the more time you spend axing the blank, the less time you'll be on the lathe. Less time on the lathe, less physical effort, less sharpening. Your tools will probably last longer. Right, so that's probably taken that to a point where I just need to finish off rounding this out now. So what we're going to be doing now is working these ears back so that this, instead of being a square shape, is more of a circular shape. Now to do that, I'm going to work with the grain. I should probably amend this chopping block so that I've got something like that to rest the bowl on, but at the moment I don't have that, so I'm making do. So as you can see, I'm actually taking that quite in close to the pencil line. So the other thing I need to do is keep that parallel, so we don't want this piece here to overhang the edge of the bowl. So as you can see, this is now much more circular. There's a couple of bits there which you don't need to worry too much about. Looking at this, this surface of the bowl is still slightly concave, and we've got a bit of bark here, so I'm actually going to take that down on the lathe and square that off when it actually goes up onto the lathe. This is a mandrel. It's going to be mounted in the face of the bowl there. It's going to be used as a drive shaft. This particular mandrel is basically a 10-inch mandrel, so for this to work I need to drill a hole into the face of the bowl. This is roughly 22mm in diameter. The hole I'm going to be drilling is going to be roughly 20mm. So it's going to be a jam fit, which is what we want, because we do not want this moving around once we start turning the bowl. You can either clamp the bowl down or have a lovely assistant like this. This is a mandrel, this is the tenon, and it's going to be a jam fit in this hole that we've drilled. That's a good fit. on the surface of the bowl, and there is no way that is coming off anytime soon. So now we need to move over to the lathe and get this mounted up, and we can start turning the bowl.